Alright, so I thought I'd make a video because the new balance changes have come out for Bruiser, and so I wanted to go over those changes and how it feels in the OPR. Shirking Fort got a buff, as did armor, especially for heavy, and so I went over, but for Shirking Fort I did some testing to see whether it's better to use Shirking Fortification over Elemental Aversion now. So I've done some testing, looked at the damage that's coming out, and then I can tell you which one I think is better. But before I do that, let's just quickly go over the changes so you know what we're dealing with. So obviously there was some nerfs to Fire Staff and Bow, which is indirectly going to help Bruisers because they're going to be taking less damage, it'll be harder to hit. And then for armor, they increased the heavy armor ratings up by 5% for heavy and the medium by 2.5%. And for the fortified changes, they increased Shirking Fort from 3.9% to 4.7%. So if you think that's, if that's like roughly almost 5% increase in armor if you have Shirking Fort on each armor piece, and then you've got an extra 5% if you're wearing heavy armor. So that's basically roughly a 10% increase in armor overall, which is nice. Then on top of that, the Great Axe got a buff to its crowded protection passive, so now it's gone from 10% to 20% damage reduction. And the Warhammer has got an outnumbered passive, which has increased it from 10% to 20%. So basically, if you're fighting in a clump, which is what the Great Axe and Warhammer are built for, you'll be taking 10% less damage no matter what weapon you're on, which is huge. Like a 10% damage reduction is a big change. And then on top of that, you've got 10% more armor. So that's some pretty epic changes. So now I'm just going to go over the testing I did between Shirking Fort and Elemental Aversion, and then we can have a look at which one was better given the above changes. Alright, so I wanted to compare whether it was worth using Elemental Aversion or Shirking Fortification with the new balance changes, because they've buffed Shirking Fortification on my heavy bruiser. And so I got a mage to come out and just start not fireballing me, heavy attacking me. Obviously, because Shirking Fort will be even better against melee and bows and physical damage. So if it's roughly equivalent with Elemental Aversion and Shirking Fort, then clearly Shirking Fort is better. Just to bear in mind that my resistance on my Shirking Fort set was 5% versus 0% on Elemental Aversion. Because the whole deal with Elemental Aversion is you go 0% resistance to elemental damage, then put all of that into Onyx. With Shirking Fort, you obviously wouldn't do that because you would be going a little bit more into you're using Shirking Fort for that resistance, so you want to have a little bit more elemental resistance. 5% is probably a bit low, it should be 10% really. So actually these numbers you got to take with a grain of salt. It should actually be even a little bit lower. And so what I found was I tended to crit all the time, so I'll just base it off the crit numbers. The heavy attack crit for Elemental Aversion ranged between 1351 to 1622, and for Shirking Fort it ranged between 1331 and 1564. So pretty close to each other, but actually the Shirking Fort was taking less damage, ever so slightly. And then if you look at the Smolder, that confirms it too. While the Smolder was ticking on me with Elemental Aversion, it was hitting for about 110 per tick. With Shirking Fort, it was hitting for 95. So yeah, lot less. So it seems like, the new meta is definitely Shirking Fort, because Shirking Fort will be even stronger against physical. And so there's kind of no downsides to doing it over Elemental Aversion. Now, if you're a medium bruiser, that might be different. I don't have two sets I can try. But in terms of heavy, you definitely want to be going Shirking Fortification, in my opinion. So hope that helps. Alright, so how did it feel? Well, I jumped on last night right as the patch went live and jumped into OPR with a Shirking Fort set on, and honestly it felt pretty incredible. I feel like this balance patch is a superb balance patch, but a very fair balance patch. Bruiser definitely feels back to its form. Its ability to clump fight and stay alive while it's in those clumps is feeling really strong again. Not invincible, you still need to play well, but it's feeling really good. So I'm really, really happy about that. Fact is, a bruiser, especially a heavy one, is still going to get owned in a 1v1 situation against a bow or a light armor player, because they lack the mobility and they're not going to be able to chase it down. So, I mean, if you're in a duel, maybe, you know, and you're wearing like a sword and shield and heavy armor, that's different. But they've always been strong. Like, it doesn't really matter what patch. So, I think that's fair. Bows will still be the kings of 1v1s, and light armor, they'll still be like very hard to catch and they can do their open field stuff. But if you're on a node and you're fighting multiple people, bruisers are going to dominate, which is what they're built for, which I think is a completely fair like trade-off. You're trading off the mobility for being able to take lots of hits all at once, and it seems like they've reached that balance really, really nicely. I really love the way that they just tweaked the changes this time. Didn't really make rapid changes, so I think that's cool. It really restores my faith. I think the dev's done an amazing job. So, yeah, I'm just showing you some excerpts. I'll show you some excerpts with some nice battleground music to finish off the video. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Fuck yes, 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 yes. Oh, I'm still taking a lot of, I can feel those bows, man. Nah, this feels right, this feels right. Like I'm still, it's not like I have to pick and ignore them or anything.